There's that mute button. Hi, everyone. Our speaker today, Maria Gerolemou, is doubtless known to most of you because she is a tireless and very important organizer in the fields of ancient mechanism and artificial life. She's helped put together a number of important conferences about science and technology in antiquity, a topic on which she has also produced a number of edited volumes, both published and in progress. These include Recognizing Miracles in Antiquity and Beyond, Mirrors and Mirroring from Antiquity to the Early Modern, that one with Lilia Diamantopoulou, and Body and Machine in the Greco-Roman World with Yorgos Kazantzidis, and that's forthcoming. Currently in progress also are the edited volumes Technical Animation in Classical Antiquity with Bur and I and Ruffell, and Body Technologies in the Greco-Roman World with Maria Chesi. Maria's own publications include, in addition to a number of articles on topics from all across the field of Greek literature, 2 monographs, 2011's Bad Women, Mad Women, Wahnsinn and der Antiken Tragödie, and the forthcoming technical automation in classical antiquity, which I, for one, am really looking forward to. She'll be speaking today on intelligent materials, emotional responses, and automation, and I'm also looking forward to hearing what she has to say about that.
Thank you, Martin, very much for your kind words, and thank, of course, Julia and Sophia, who is not here, I guess, yet.
Not yet.
Me to give a paper in this series of lecture. I'll now try to share my screen.
I think you have just to press on screen sharing and then select what you would like to share.
This is what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, wonderful.
Can you see the PowerPoint now?
Mechanical to, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I've changed the title slightly. I'm sorry about that. Mechanical automation and emotional responses to materials, tools, design. I will start by explaining what I mean with automation. The term describes, above all, nature's reproductive power and its automatism, that is the spontaneous activity of nature. For instance, the growing of a flower is described as automata, or the death of a cat in Herodotus. In the medical texts, in the Hippocratic text, for instance, the term automata refers to everything that happens in or by the cavity without technical intervention. On the other hand, what I described as technical automation, a technical automaton, can be comprehended not as the result of a spontaneous process, of a natural spontaneous process, but as the product of processes which are designed to be spontaneity-driven, sorry. However, what we mean by technical automation, for example, in the archaic period or in the 5th century BC, as this is presented, for example, on the Athenian stage, differs from what is for what this could stand for in the treatises of the Hellenistic engineers. And this is not because, this happens not because automation as such alters its meaning through the centuries, but because technique does. Now, in the archaic period, for instance, to start with, technical automation resembles nature's functionality, and thus it displays continuities between nature and technology, between nature and techne. While in the classical period, with the emergence of the polis and the rising of what Christian Meyer calls Kennensbewusstsein, or the consciousness of ability, technical automation and techne in general is established as a distinct power, further defined through the intention of the manufacturers and users, and thereby often described as a threatening force towards nature. Now, in the 4th century BC, technical automation is used first as a heuristic device for illustrating ideas about natural motion and causation. With the establishment of the art of engineering, the Hellenistic period, a new automation age begins. An age that is primarily concerned with a type of automaticity inherent in the machine itself, instead of entirely determined by its human designer, who is now perceived as being a mere part of the mechanical process. If we for a moment ignore the fact that it is the engineers, of course, instructions and design that are being followed in a mechanical procedure in this arrangement, the machine's behavior could look like a deliberate action. The internal mechanical procedure is what forces the device to respond in the appropriate manner. Hence, in this third phase of automation, we move from simple production or reproduction to mechanical efficiency. This new type of technical automation, which is realized through the use of various tools, materials, and techniques, suggests a new method of producing automation that is, as I said, liveness and spontaneity. This new method produces the automaton exclusively as a result of, describes the automaton exclusively as the result of a mechanical procedure. Moreover, this kind of automation, this mechanical automation, cultivates a new kind of audience, an audience that is triggered to search for the well-hidden cause behind technological operations. Since, as I said, in this third type of automation, the engineer is pictured as a mere part of the whole procedure. Now, in this talk, I will first discuss, I will not talk about natural automation, neither technical automation, as this is pictured in the 5th century, in the classical period, but I will focus and discuss the meaning of technical automation in the 4th century BC, and how this is used in analogy or along with natural automation. And I will then deal with the actual manufacturing of mechanical automata by particularly looking at Hero's work and emphasizing how tools, techniques, and materials are used to essentially supplement or replace a human agency, and thus at the end produce wonderment, Tauma. Now, before proceeding to the heuristic use of technical automation, specifically in Plato and Aristotle, it might be useful to clarify first what is being described as a technical automaton in the 4th century BC. Technical automation in this period could be related to cases of neurospasta, that is, puppets with moving limbs, and taumata, trick acts of undefined nature. Here you can see the first picture is, of course, a puppet, a neurospaston, and the second picture describes what I think it is the result of a taumatopoeia, the result of a wonder show. What defines both a tauma and a neurospaston is the ability to act as in a simple and natural, spontaneous way. Although they seem to differ the two of them, the neurospastain and the taumatopoiein, they seem to differ to the degree they appear to depend on human intervention. In the former case, in the case of the neurospastain, the puppeteer's skillful hands, although hidden, his strings and the special kind of a puppet, we need a puppet with moving limbs, are clearly responsible for the puppet's allegedly spontaneous motion. Whereas in the case of Diamantopoulou, the juggler or the magician, is an expert in curtailing human and technical agency completely when performing. He is not only hidden, but moreover, the technical equipment he uses is either non-existent or common and beyond suspicion. What's however important in both cases, in the case of Diamantopoulou and Nevrospasta, is to deceive the audience into believing that what they witness is merely a simple act, although in reality it requires an enormous amount of effort and technique. Just to give you some examples for each category. Athenaios in the Technosôma refers in book 1 to various entertainers, among them an Athenian named Pothenus, who was a famous marionette player, and Neurospastis, and some miracle workers, Diamantopoulou, a guy called Xenophon, his students, Cratysthenes, who could create, according to the text, fire automatically, spontaneously, automatos, and someone called Nymphodorus. Later in the text, in book 4, quoting Matros' parodic poem, Attic Dinner Party, Athenaios talks about two female slaves who are called, who are described as Diamantopoulou, tricksters, who are driven like swift birds by someone called Stratocles. In a similar fashion, in a fragment by Posidonius, the Syrian king Antiochus enjoys practicing Diamantopoulou, doing tricks in front of a captive audience, and Neurospastain, manipulating puppets through strings. While in these sources, puppeteers and tricksters are mentioned together because they both, because of the spectacular character of the entertainment, they both serve an offer. Xenophon, in his symposium in book 2 and 7, by explaining how the work of miracle workers is perceived, help us to understand how these might differ from the Neurospastai. He specifically refers to a dancing girl skilled in acrobatic tricks as a maker of wonders, and a boy who also provides a wondrous show. Their expertise, according to Socrates, lies exactly in the way they offer the maximum pleasure to the audience that watches them, while putting, or at least looking as they are putting, the minimum effort and using the most ordinary equipment, a potter's wheel and their own body. Now, the ability to produce wonders by using simple apparatuses and ways is probably what made people in the past, according to Pappus, who is a mathematician of the 4th century AD, to call the engineers wonder makers, thaumatosiurgoi, who by using simple materials and tools can produce something wonderful. Pappus classifies these wonder engineers into 3 categories: those who generate wonders through air, those who generate wonders through cords and sinews and could reproduce the motions of animate beings, and those who create mechanical wonders through water, specifically by using bodies that float in water or use water to tell the time. On the other hand, engineers seems to be associated with puppeteers too, precisely because of the allegedly easiness or simpleness of their activity. So Aristotle on the Cosmos in 398, a text probably of the 1st century AD, he describes the divine in terms of mechanopoioi in the edition of Forley. In another edition, you have, instead of mechanopoioi, you have the term mechanotechne, and another edition, you have the term megalotechne. he describes the divine through his relation through the term mechanopoioi and neuros-paste, through both terms. According to the text, the mechanopoioi can initiate automatic motion by using the single release mechanism of a machine, while the latter, the neuros-pastes, make his puppets move automatically by pulling a single rope. Both mechanopoioi and neuros-paste seem to practice their art effortless with a single motion. And that's why they are compared to the divine, which earlier in the text is described also as aoratos, as invincible. Now in Plato, and more specifically in laws, the paradigm that is deployed for discussing self-control as a central principle of the spirit of laws makes use of the notion of tauma, again, in order to describe an unspecified toy, which is designed for amusing the gods. This is a paignion. Human passions are seen here as analogous to the sinews or cords that force the toy to move towards various directions. Hence the term tauma here highlights the performative aspect of imposing self-motion to inanimate matter. This is at least what its association with the word paignion suggests. This is also clearly the message of another passage in Plato, in the Laws again, where taumata are considered to be children's favored show. In other passages in Plato, for example, in Republic and in the Sophist, taumata are associated further with the deceptive aspect of taumatopoieia. In these cases, the juggler or the puppeteer, we don't know exactly, are responsible for performing taumata in such a way that they disorient the audience, making it believe that what it sees is the result of natural activity and effort. Hence here, tauma reflects the bedazzlement of the viewers and does not further define the way through which this is accomplished. In contrast to Plato now, wonderment in Aristotle points towards to the relationship between cause and effect, action and reaction. Specifically, when the former cannot be perceived by the senses, it spurs a sentiment of efficient aporia in its perceivers rather than dazzles them. In Aristotle, things animated and inanimate that look like moving automatically are described as automaton taumaton, usually translated as miraculous marionettes. However, according to Aristotle, those automata taumaton and the things that are compared to them are not, they never move completely on their own spontaneously. In this context, automatic motion is not only the result of an external force, but it could also depend on internal forces. And while external forces could be separated from the actual space and time of the automatic activity, the nousa kinesis, which refers to moving forces within the moving body, is constantly present. For instance, on the generation of animals, 703.4b, where Aristotle talks about reproduction, he explains that the external agency of the semen's producer, as in the case of an automaton, eventually causes the embryo's movement without being in direct contact with the semen, but by having once been in contact with it. Similar to the automata, semen has a specific dynamism, semen has a specific potentiality. Once the principle of movement is applied from the outside, this potentiality, this dynamism becomes actuality, energeia, which then develops without interruption. For the same reason, in motion of animals, the animal's motion is compared by Aristotle to that of a technical automaton. which moves after a very small movement of the strings, which then strike one another, or a toy wagon and a maxion, which a driver pushes straight or goes in a circle because its wheels do not have the same size. An animal's activity is pictured as the response to a power which could be hidden, as in the case of the automaton, whereby the animal sinews correspond to the automaton's strings and its bones to the automaton's pegs, wood, and iron, or the animal's activity could be revealed, as in the case of the toy cart and its driver. That is to say, both automata and carts are able to transform an initial steering into a different kind of motion. The automata, when jerked, move their limbs in various directions, and the cart, while being pushed forward, moves in a circular manner because of its wheels. Nevertheless, animals, in contrast to automata and carts, not only are self-movers, but they're also self-changers. Hence, they could not only adapt their body limbs, some parts become larger and others become smaller, due to environmental conditions, but most importantly, they could change their behavior and activity, including locomotion, according to factors such as intellect, imagination, wish, appetite, and so on, mind, desire. Now, this intellectual engagement that we find in the 4th century with both natural and technical automatic activity gives rise to the new attitudes toward automaticity and fosters the beginning of the new mechanical type of self-moving artifacts whose manufacture will be pursued by the Hellenistic engineers. And this is the next point I wish to turn to. Mechanical automation in Chiron of Alexandria. Machines and mechanical operation devised to be automatous, spontaneity-driven, are partly the outcome of 3 interrelated parameters, that is design, mechanism, and materials. To start with materials, specific materials are chosen by engineers because of their ability to adapt, can solve various technical problems, and thus be functional in order to serve the engineering plan of automaticity. Materials serve what Hero calls a complex design, diathesis poikele, which responds to pro-K-many processes, a prearranged engineering plan, and mythos, plot, and scenario, of course. Pneumatic automata, for instance, work with air, and it is exactly because of this material, according to Hero in the proemion of his pneumatica, that they can respond in a controllable, that is, in this case, reversible way to an external stimulus, such as certain mechanical stress or temperature. A similar result is due to the shaving of horn and dried sponges. When compressed and released, they return to the same space and return to the same bag, according to Hero. Metals, on the other hand, while they are capable of supporting larger forces, at the same time, they have mechanical constraints. For instance, usually their rigidity cannot be controlled in a reversible manner. Now, for different reasons, and although there is no extensive discussion on the service performance of wood or horn in automatic technology, Hero in his work on automata states that mobile automata, in order to move easily, should be made out of light and dried out wood. Generally, they should be made of light materials, and specifically their limbs out of horn. Moreover, in another context, Hero argues that wood is used in constructions not only because of its light weight, and machines should be light in order to be easily dismantled and transferred, but also because wood is not so expensive. Now, in addition to materials, engineering processes also integrate tools and technologies that amplify the ability to automate artifacts. Along with the already known from the archaic period, wheel and axle, as well as the lever and the wedge, two further tools are being introduced in the Hellenistic period, that is the gear wheel and the screw. Here in his mechanics not only explains the use of windlass, lever, pulley, wedge, and screw, but also the reason why they are supposed to move large weights despite their small force. In book 2, he explains how these 5 tools, when combined, could move a large weight with small force, which causes wonderment, while in book 3, he describes how they could be more effective when working together with other tools or devices. The working of automata from a single external movement coming from a hydraulic, pneumatic energy, or depending upon a falling weight or an Husplenx, a spring probably, often relies on the use of or combination of these and other tools. A correct arrangement of tools mechanism could result, according to Hero, to a spontaneity driven activity or movement of temple doors, altars, and other automata, which are called hypagonta, the mobile automata, stata, stationary, that is figures that look as if they move on their own, although they do not actually move from their position. Now, in both cases of automata, that is the stata automata, the stationary automata, and the mobile automata, according to Hero, one could cause motion without approaching the figures at all. The stationary automaton is, according to Hero, an older version of an automaton called tauma, probably because it could admit of more types of arrangements than the mobile one, and thus produce more wonder. But I will come to the case of mechanical wonderment later on in my speech. Now, design, this is the third parameter on which, as I argue, automaticity relies. Shape or form, specifically, are important to a machine's aesthetic qualities, non-complexity, and safety. As Hero puts it, both stationary automata and mobile automata hide their working mechanisms behind the machine's performance by making them invisible, aphané, that is, by placing them where they couldn't be seen and observed. The invisibility of mechanism is interconnected with the concept of smallness in mechanical technology. The automaton's small design underlines further the engineer's technical skills, who manages to get ever more power into an ever smaller space. Hero, in his work on automata in book 4, stresses this association by advising future automata makers to build automata small enough in order to avoid the suspicion of someone sitting inside the automaton operating it. The design of the automaton is further connected with the ease of its operation. Although Hero admits that his contemporaries developed further the art of automata making by introducing a more complicated diathesis, a more complicated arrangement, which could present elegant stories as tale stories and many and disparate movements. He criticized, for example, Philon's construction of Athena's Epiphany in a play via a crane as ergodesteros, as something that is very difficult and complicated. Whereas, as he suggests, what is more appropriate is having an Athena that can be moved on a hinge, laid down on the scene, and when needed, to be drawn up and down by cords. An engineering plan should be designed to direct even an ignorant user towards an uncomplicated process and safe result. Now, what is simple and safe or not risky refers to the construction's visibility, which presupposes thinking about where and how much to automate. Mechanical feasibility and wonderment. Mechanical feasibility is associated to what Alfred Gell in his seminal paper, the technology of enchantment and the enchantment of technology refers to, whereby approaching art as the product of techniques, he introduces the notion of technical wonder, which could increase by familiarizing the audience with possible challenges, and in our case, the automata's mechanical realization. Hero's treatise on automata gives the opportunity to the reader to have an insight into the technical issues faced by the engineer while constructing his machine, and to imagine the manipulative skills that he should have in order to complete the final work. More important, however, the audience gets to know that the movements of the automata are part of being a product of a maneuvering engineer, are also the result of tools, materials, and design. The type of wonder coming from such a context differs from Aristotle's notion of wonder that we have seen above, and it's stated also in the metaphysics. I didn't have the chance to talk about this. The Aristotelian, the mechanical wonder, as we see it as it's described in Hero, it persists alongside its rational explanation, that it is related not only with the hidden causes of motion, but the more it is revealed or explained, the wonderment it causes culminates in relation to the final product. Moreover, the engineering process aims to construct a mechanical reality. This reality, which captures inanimate matter as moving, though paradoxical, becomes perceptible through the senses. As we have learned from Hero's text, the machine is something that we can see and touch, both intellectually and perceptually. We can delve into the properties and function of its individual parts and acquire throughout knowledge of the principles which underpin its operation. As a result, the amazement, the trauma that's aroused by the machine does not merely signify the audience distortions, as the case in Plato, or its momentaneous wonderment before incomprehensible causes as in Aristotle. Wonderment in the case of the machine is directly linked with the physical outcome of the mechanical procedure, the mechanical device, its complexity, poikelia, and the way it functions. That is to say, and with this I will close my speech, in Hero, what is described as wonderful is the technical explanation of the machine itself. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Maria. There was a lot in that talk to discuss, and I'm sure that many of us have questions. So if you'd like to ask a question, could I ask that you just type your name into the chat at the bottom there? Make sure you send it to everyone, and then I will call on you and we can do your question. I do have a question. I have several questions, but just to start, Maria, I wonder if you have thought about or have anything to say about the links between the versions of mechanism that you're talking about and kind of cosmological world pictures. Because I know that Aristotle, for instance, in De Motu, uses a lot of this kind of mechanical language to talk about the way in which the prime mover intervenes on the universe to get it going. I don't know if you have anything to say about the development of cosmology in light of the theory of mechanisms that are available to people at these various points in time.
Yes, I mean, Berryman have talked about that, Sylvia Berryman in her book, mechanical analogies are used again as heuristic devices, as in the case of motion of animals, in order to describe cosmological patterns of motion. Yes.
Thank you. Okay, it looks like we have a question from Sean. Go ahead, Sean.
Hello, Maria. How are you?
Hi, Sean.
I have a question that hadn't really occurred to me until I heard the talk, which is great actually, because the whole idea of automata as pygnia
Yeah.
Which is repeated in Michael of Ephesus as well. He talks about in his work on De Incestu and in his commentary on De Generatione Animalium, talks about paignia as what Aristotle's talking about when he talks about these kind of automatic puppets, and he gives a description of them. But it hadn't really occurred to me that paignia, it's also a literary genre. And it seems to have something to do with kind of jokes or tricks or these kinds of childish things.
Yeah.
But you also talk about how, so they're portrayed this way, but they're also sources of tauma. And this is what's interesting because, like it's usually, I would think, of quite divine, serious things that are objects of wonder, like, the movement of the sun up and down, like across the year, like when Aristotle in the Metaphysics talks about the things that people wonder at that got them to start doing philosophy. These aren't like the things your kids play with.
Yeah.
And so I was just wondering, is there a shift in the seriousness of the machines as people start to uncover more of the principles, as they become more like natural, more like automatic phenomena that have kind of their own internal principles rather than simply a kind of daedalus statue or something like this?
Or divine statues, like Hephaestus.
Exactly.
Well, yes, although tauma as a term, it does not refer only to the divine. We have tauma refers also to it's a very broad term, starting from Homer to Herodotus and so on. It's not a term that defines, describes only divine activity. But I guess, yes, in Homer, I guess it could be like an attempt to naturalize in a way, or the process of making something animate. Is this what you are asking, Sean?
Yeah, something along those lines, just about what is there anything to the idea that, or these competing notions about what these things are, like merely playthings versus things that cause quite a bit of wonder? Or is the wonder that one experiences through a kind of plaything similar to the wonder that one would experience when observing celestial movements that they can't account for, these types of things? Like, is it there? Just wondering what the relation is between these two ideas. Like, we talk about childlike wonder in English quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so I guess it's, but at the same time, it seems to kind of put them in a lower class to call them toys than maybe tauma might. That's I guess maybe that's just me though who's thinking like this.
Yes, there's a big discussion around that. If we should these automata, if we should deal with them as toys or as scientific results, as a result of a serious of serious scientists, for example, or because we have them also in temples, again, if they have something to do with the divine. But I think nowadays, most scholars agree that, first of all, there are toys. There are toys. Toys that, of course, exhibit a specific technical expertise, but they're still toys.
Cool, thanks.
Matteo looks like a hand up there. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Maria, for the talk. I have two questions. So one is maybe just I didn't get the point, so I would like to re-ask the first one. And it is when you connected the change of attitude of Aristotle with toward automata, with the fact that Hellenistic engineers then started building different kinds of automata. So I don't know, I sort of got from your argument that this is a relation, or cause and effect relation between the two, which I don't think you really wanted to say because it would be too big. But so that's why I would like to ask again.
Yes.
And the second point basically has to do with your conclusion. So first of all, why do you describe design as last? after materials and tools. In a sense, was not very clear to me whether you speak about, when you speak about design, whether you're speaking about how to use those machine, which is their effects, or how to plan, conceive, and really design them or build them. I think the 2 points should be distinguished in the process. And in general, I also would like to ask about the diagrams or any kind of visual representation. So you spoke about Hero of Alexandria, famous later on for all those beautiful diagrams in his work. So whether, which is their role exactly in both, in all these aspects, in designing, in using, and in explaining them. So the very conclusion of your talk.
To answer your first question, no, it has nothing. I mean, I ended with Aristotle, and I just, in order to connect the 2 parts of the talk, I just said that the general discussion and around natural and technical automation creates the background for what we have it's the background for what we have later on in the Hellenistic treatises, engineering treatises. The answer, the first question, yes. The second question has to do, why did I choose to speak about design last? Design, how the way I understand design, it's what I actually put in the slides. I just wanted to talk about the small size of the automata, and I also wanted to stress out that something that we find in Hero's text, that things should be kept simple, and the machine should not be too complicated. That's why I described, I referred to the example of Athena that we found both in Philon and Hero, and the way Hero suggests an easier solution. Now, you said, can you please repeat the second part of your question?
Yeah, the question was more related to the distinction between design in sense of a conception of an automata and use, or distribution, or yes, description of how to use it, or even its effects. So you could distinguish more and more aspects. And I think probably you should distinguish between the two, at least the 2 processes. One is conceiving the automata, and one is using the automata. And if so, then whether the pictorial or visual representations, like drawings, diagrams, and so, play a role in some of these aspects, or in all of them maybe, but then different roles. So like designing and conceiving, explaining, using.
Yes, I mean, yes, the conception and the use of the automata are 2 different things. I was trying to talk about the conception, I mean, the engineering plan of the design. That's why I refer to smallness and to what is considered to be safe and simple. These 2 things belong to the plan, to the engineering plan, to the conception, and not to the use. They have nothing to do with the use of the automata. And of course, diagrams play a role in this, and not only they explain how to, I mean, they talk about design, but also they contribute to what I try to explain as technical wonder. But I guess Courtney Robbie said everything in her book about diagrams and technical process and wonder. I don't have anything else to add. I just tried to see things from a slightly different point of view.
Thank you. Thank you.
Maria, I have another question. I was led to, listening to your talk, to think about the contrast, not just between attitudes towards automation that emerges between the classical and Hellenistic period, but also more broadly about this contrast in views of techne. Whereas in Plato, the assumption is always that the user is the competent judge of a particular craft product because of the user's knowledge, right, of what it is to have a good shoe or what it is to have a good shield or something. It seems like what you're unfolding is a conception of a craft product that works exactly insofar as it exploits the viewer's initial ignorance of its function.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you have any comments on that contrast, or if you perhaps see it as part of a general development in attitudes of technology, maybe towards the place where we are now, where the assumption is always if somebody does not understand how to use a technology, it is the user's fault, not the technology.
Well, no. In Plato, it's, as you have said, in Plato has to do with the with the deception on part of the user. Not, it has nothing to do with the. It has. I mean, if in the laws, when the tauma is referring to as the favor is described as the favored choice of children, I guess there we have to do. I mean, there you have the deception on behalf of the user, on behalf of the controller, and of course the ignorance on behalf of the audience. It's both there. But in the Sophistis, for example, and in the Politeia, in the Republic, there it's the term clearly points towards the deception thesis of the controller, of the one who controls the tauma.
To clarify, I guess I was thinking of a contrast between not necessarily the use of thalma in Plato and its use later on, but the way that Plato talks about techne in general as producing products which are supposed to be judged by the user of the product. So the craftsman is not the master evaluator of their craft. That's the user. The shoemaker is not the person who's most knowledgeable about shoes. It's the person who wears the shoes.
Yes.
So it seems that thalma as a craft object makes a really marked contrast with that, and maybe
yes, in a broader sense, yes, of course. But these changes apparently, I mean, it depends also from the genre. If you compare Plato as a whole and the notion of thalma and techne in Plato, the techne in the text of engineers, in the engineering art, it has nothing to do with the deception, of course. It depends from the genre. Did I answer your question, Martin?
Yeah, I think so. Julia.
Oh yeah, thanks. Thank you, Maria, for the speech. I would have a question on the notion of thalma in Hero as the bedazzlement for the mechanical system underpinning the machine operations. I was wondering perhaps if you could articulate a little bit more on this understanding of the notion of thalma in Hero.
Yes, what I was trying to say is that in Hero, thalma is the result of a process. Thalma is related to materials, thalma is related to design, to the mechanical process in general. And of course, with the final product, it's not something, it's not a moment, it's not something deceptive, it's not something that plays with the ignorance of the audience, it's something very productive that it praises and celebrates the final product, the machine. And it's in connection with the audience. The audience is, that's why I said at the beginning that this third type of automation, the mechanical automation, cultivates a type of audience that it trains a kind of audience that wishes to search behind the curtains, wishes to see the secrets of the machine.
So basically, if I understand correctly, the audience would know from the start that this machine are faking something.
Yes, yes. He talks about aletheia here. He talks about a reality. He does not want to deceive his audience.
Okay, thank you very much.
One more question, Maria, and this is just a point of information. Oh, we've got something from Marta there. Go ahead, Marta.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I actually have a rather basic question about the phenomenon you described. You quoted at the beginning of your presentation Xenophon and Athenaeus, and then I was wondering if you maybe could give us, or maybe just me, a few more informations about the public attending to Neurospata and Automata, and the occasions, the frames of the exhibition of the place in which they were exhibited. Because yeah, I would like to understand better the expectation about the phenomenon and the interest of the philosopher and mathematician, and also if the occasions and the public change it through times, from the 1st century BC and then later on the 1st century with Euron of Alexandria. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Very interesting question. Yes, of course. I mean, these neurospasta, these neurospasta are, most of the cases are presented we have a symposic environment, part of a symposium. In Xenophon, there you have Socrates, and he says, and now I feel pleasure with this. As a wise man, I should feel pleasure. I should feel wonderment by seeing these tricks. But then one should be prepared to be amazed. He says, as in the case of he refers to some natural phenomena where someone should be amazed, should be prepared to be amazed. This is the context for Socrates as a philosopher, and he's there. But other people, they just stare at the Automata or at the Neurospasta, and they just have fun.
Yeah, I was wondering if they attended to the exhibition when they were children, and then afterward they wrote about it on a philosophical level. Because you said that they took place in a symposium, but then children didn't take part of the symposium. So I was wondering, like, if it also took place on street or like.
We do have, I mean, this Pothinus, because he was a very famous neurospastis. We do have one source, but it's not that, I mean, that talks that this Pothinus exhibit his neurospasta in Athens, probably in the street or in the theater. I think it's in the theater. That doesn't mean that, but we don't have any sources saying that that among the audience were small children. And some of these automata probably they were part of parades. They could find in temples.
And just a few questions more. Were they performed by slaves, as you said in with the Xenophon or maybe Athenaeus, or do we know also about like puppets, player as profession, and thaumaturgos as profession? Like?
Yes, I mean the Automata, the Diamantopoulou, some of them in the Xenophon, exactly, they are slave. There's the two of them are slave girls. But in the case of the neurospasta, if the neurospasta, the one who manipulated the dolls, were slaves, I don't remember any source talking about this. there is Maya Muratov is the one who studied the neurospasta, the dolls with moving limbs. If you're interested in check, but I don't remember any source talking about the neurospastas, if they're slaves or not, to describe them in any sense.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Irene.
Hi, Maria. Thank you very much for your talk. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I love the talk and also the gifts. They were so nice. So my question is about the relationship between wonder in the audience and knowledge, and whether from the archaic period to the Hellenistic period there is any inverse proportion, like the more knowledge the author or the audience acquire, the less wonder, or not. So I'm just curious about this relationship.
What do you mean, the author? The author of the text that
Like
Automata?
Yeah, like for example here, so the more the higher the level of technological knowledge or competence is expected, either in the other, like for example hero, or in the audience of an event, the less is expected a level of wonder. Like, I know that this is a trick, and so I'm not so much amazed.
It depends again from the genre. For example, I tried to see the technical automation phenomenon through its entirety, starting from Homer indeed. But it always depends from the genre. For example, in Tragödie, where I mean, you do have technological automation. Remember Artemis statue moving automatos in Iphigenia in Aulis. But there is, it's a completely different context. And we do have wonder there, but there it's a wonder. It's actually a divine wonder produced as the result of technical automation, because it's not a real wonder. It's a wonder that is designed by Iphigenia herself and her brother. But there it produces wonder, divine wonder, because it's the context demands the context of the play and the audience. Yes, I mean they are ready to believe in a divine context, in a divine wonder. This, I mean, you have, yes, in theater you have cases of divine technical automata, or you have cases, but in most of the cases are they are related to deceit, with the deception. In Homer, technical automation is again different. And again, in Homer, it depends in which context it is. You have automata in relation to Hephaestus. You have automata in relation to, I don't know, automation in relation to poets and so on. And then in Plato, again, it's different. In the laws, it's different. It has to do with a play, with a Pygmalion. The Republics, again, different. Has to do with deception. In Aristotle, again, it's different. And eventually, in the engineered, again, technological automation is different, and consequently, the wonderment that that produces the technological automation is different. Again, it's a different context. It's a different genre. It depends. It's not the same thing. What is important for me, at least, is that they all try to reproduce this natural automation, natural automatism, in all cases.
Okay, I have to split because I have another obligation. But thanks again, Maria, for that extremely interesting talk. And I'm going to pass the chair to Julia Maria at this point. So bye, everyone.
Thank you much, Martin. I think we have a question from Susanne.
Yes, thank you very much, Maria. Also, and yeah, I'm trying to connect this whole discourse that you elaborated on to something else which you did not mention explicitly, which is the relation between art and nature. Mm-hmm. I'm wondering whether this is somehow part of what you explained to us. And talking about Hieron of Alexandria, you mentioned that the working mechanisms in these automata have to be invisible, and there's the notion of some ease of operation, and that somehow reminded me of ekphrasis, of the notion of ekphrasis, and this intermingling of artificial objects and living or natural appearance, you know. So I'm wondering whether this, at least at a certain time or in certain texts that you examined, is related to the discourse of ekphrasis and this whole aesthetic notion of animating artificial objects.
Yes, to start with your last question, absolutely. I mean, you can find it in ekphrasis. It's very similar to what we have in Hero. That's why Robbie chooses to describe engineering treatises with the term ekphrasis. She talks about technical ekphrasis, mm-hmm. And not only the invisibility and the ease to which these technical artifacts are moving is being adopted by the ekphrastic writers, but also the emphasis on materials and techniques. For instance, if you read Callistratus, his description on kairos, this is it's a very beautiful description that you can see how mechanics influence the way animation and art and the description of art how has changed through this new medium of the machine, because it produces a different way of visualizing artifacts in general. And of course, animation is being the metaphorical aspect of animation is being influenced by the real animated artifacts through mechanical tools and materials and mechanisms.
Thank you very much.
The kairos it's a very good example of that. There you can see the mechanism, how the kairos statue. Of course, everything's metaphorical, and because the kairos is turning, but the way Callistratus describes this statue, I think it's very clear that he's influenced by the mechanical description of artifacts. Now, the first part of your question, the techne and physis distinction, actually the whole discussion is based on this distinction. On the one hand, we have the natural automation that reflects, of course, physis, and the technical automation that reflects the technical abilities of human and the human skills to reproduce nature in a way. That's why I said at the beginning that because this divide between techne and physis changes through the centuries, along with this change, the notion of technical automation changes as well. In Homer, techne and physis are not authoritative opposing examples. They're not techne versus physis, while in the 5th century, the distinction between techne and physis it's very clear, and we have this Kenensbewusstsein that Meyer describes. changes again in the Hellenistic period and afterwards. I think, and this is what Sylvia Berryman and Shirky say when they tried to explain the cataphysine and paraphysine in Aristotle, for example. They say that the paraphys is not actually something against nature, but it's something that it's an activity that actually supplements nature.
Mm-hmm. Can I just add a small further question? Because when I'm listening to your explanations now, I'm wondering actually how the notion of wonder now fits in this system of nature on the one side, art on the other side, because in a naive way, I would assume that nature as well as art are not very narrowly related to wonder, because both are processes that can be analyzed, that can be rationalized, that can be, that are not metaphysically connected. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I would say there's a triangle between wonder, nature, and art in a way. So
there is a triangle, yes. Well, the wonder is the response to
okay, that's on the side of the public, of the audience.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's a different notion then of wonder. Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
Yes, thank you so much everyone for joining in, and of course Maria, thank you so much for your talk. I am in the unpleasant situation now to have to put an end to the discussion since we are already 7:12. Yeah, well, it is over. And I hope to see you again. And I wish you a very nice weekend.
Thank you all. It was great to see you.
Thank you. Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.